session comes from Recovery Point and Pure Storage, and presenting for Recovery Point and Pure Storage are Jeff Judy and Andrew Miller. Jeff is Chief Cloud Architect at Recovery Point. Andrew is Principal Technologist at Pure. It's always great to see both these gentlemen on our events. So I'm going to turn things over to Andrew.
Hey, thanks so much, as always, Scott, for the kind introduction, and really the whole actual tech team. Always appreciate and enjoy being part of a Megacast and frankly, all the other actual tech events that we all put on. This one especially, crafting and implementing data protection strategy and disaster recovery plan. The reason I'm particularly excited about this one is frankly a little bit of my background. So speaking to you, Andrew Miller, Lead Principal Technologist Americas with Pure Storage. I've been with Pure for a couple years now, about 4 years now. But frankly, I've done a good bit in this space, even had some plans I proposed to the customer that never quite worked out because I didn't understand enough of actually some of what we're going to cover. But I'm really excited to be joined today by Jeff. Jeff, do you mind introducing yourself as well?
Yes, thanks, Andrew. I'm Jeff Judy. I'm the Disaster Recovery Chief Cloud Architect for Recovery Point Systems. I've been with Recovery Point for about 11 years now, and it's been a good ride along the way. I've seen many, many, many DR tests and DR scenarios. So happy to discuss today with you about DR strategy.
So I think what you may have already heard a little bit from Jeff and myself, and I'll even add a little bit more. Like, I started as a customer for 7 years and partner for 8 years. It was probably more important for you, frankly, than my working for Pure right now. But based on that, and Jeff mentioning, 11 years, what we wanted to start with is not just start with what Pure and Recovery Point do, but actually start with architecture knowledge that we've learned over the years, why some of this stuff matters, if you will, before we get to the technology. So section 1, share architecture knowledge. Section 2, showing you how Pure and Recovery Point can help. Please make sure to put chat questions into the Q&A box, that you can type them up. We'll make sure to be watching them throughout and have some questions at the end. Hopefully that sounds fair. And like it says there, plans are useless, but in this area, planning is everything. If we haven't done the planning, we won't be ready. We always have to be able to adapt. So with that, let's dive into section number 1, and we'll kind of tag team this a little bit. In some ways, actually, 25 minutes is not all that much time. So sharing architecture knowledge. Why? Why do we bother with this level of planning? Like it says, plans are useless, planning is everything. Well, the why, if you ask someone in your organization, let's say it's the CEO, the CIO, someone up the org chart, what do they expect? Can they lose any data? How long can they afford to be down? Well, often the response is very different than the actual capabilities that that you have. You look at your systems, you look at your organization, what you can do. Another way to look at it, is the business expectations. Maybe I can't afford to be down at all, and we have to come back online right away. And it's almost like when you compare the business expectations to the IT capabilities, it's almost like there's this elephant in the room, dare I say, right? Kind of thing. And actually having a little bit of fun with slides, right? Kind of thing. Because there is the sense that there's this disconnect between the expectations and the capabilities. And if we don't resolve that, it will get resolved, but at a very unpleasant, unhappy time to do so, right? So what are we actually protecting against? What we're protecting against is a range of items that aren't, frankly, inherently technology related. There's business items around losing customers and them being dissatisfied, or loss of sales and income that relates to the customer side. If you're a regulated business, there can be a whole side of regulatory fines, not being able to bring online new projects and business plans. Maybe bonuses are lost that are contracted with outside companies. Maybe how long that we're down. There's even increased expenses internally because these are super stressful days and you've got to pay folks to be online and doing things. But then even just the human aspect, people, these are sometimes the worst days of people's careers, and people burning out, or just at a family level. Maybe they've got disabled loved ones to care for and they can't be in when the business needs them, right? So there's even this personal and human aspect to it. And what is a disaster, though? So there is some definitional stuff here. Now, I have twin boys. At the point when I first put this picture into presentation, they were a couple years old. So maybe this is a disaster for you at a personal level, or maybe for the kids shown here. Not my kids, actually. It's maybe the happiest day of their life, but still, this is a disaster maybe at a personal level, and you can see the age of the TV in the background. But at a business level, there is a definition. An event that affects a system or service such that significant effort, major effort, is required to restore the original performance level. Another concept, One that's worth, and now this is a little bit of a text heavy slide, I realize, but there's also the ideas here of business continuity versus disaster recovery versus operational recovery. These are different things that actually often have different expectations at a business level, even if they don't quite realize that, right? So in this case, business continuity, if there's something that happens at one site, you lose a site, there's no impact. Things go on. In an application level, customer level, you don't even notice, right? Even though you have to go fix a lot of things under the covers. Disaster recovery gets into the idea of you have to push the big red button. It's a failure, and you have to do things in a non-routine way to move to an alternative system. You have to declare that. Operational recovery, this is almost more of like have multi-pathing or multiple power supplies or multiple PDUs in a rack. This is almost about this shouldn't be a major item. This is just stuff that you plan for in regular data center architecture. But putting things into these categories can help, especially at a communication level, up inside the organization. So what does this look like in our environment? What scenarios should we plan for? Scenarios are super important. We'll come back to that later. And where do we begin? Where I often like to begin, how do we do it, is around the concepts that you may know, but want to emphasize they're critical here, of RPO and RTO. Basically, how much data can I afford to lose from the point we declare a disaster or looking back in time, right? So from the point of disaster, is it, minutes, hours, days of data lost, my most recent recovery point, dictated often by the frequency of recovery. And then from the point I declared a disaster, looking forward in time, how long does it take me to come back online? Okay. This is critical often when having a business discussion and even kind of digging into this, not just assuming the answers are true right away. What is the cost associated with these, right? Because when you map this over to the technology choices, there is a classic bell curve around cost. The closer that you want to get to real time, the higher the cost is, right? And we see this shift over, if anything, I go back, 5, 10, 15 years and working on some of this stuff. This is not a static bell curve. The technologies sometimes mean that, you may have what used to have be very expensive data to hours and minutes, or sometimes when you get all the way, it's actually really expensive when you want to get to zero. There are a bunch of building blocks here, which is where I think I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Andrew. So we'll talk about the foundation needed here to create a good data protection strategy. And it really ties into the bell curve slide you just saw. I like to talk about it it's a traditional framework called people, process, and technology. It's a framework that's been around for a long time, but it's very applicable to your disaster recovery strategies today. And starting with people, they're the most critical component to maintaining your business services during disaster events. And if you dive into that, one of the things I like to focus on is leadership. And that's really where you need to be in alignment with what the business requirements are versus what you're capable of delivering. So make sure that you talk to your CIO and that, as Andrew mentioned earlier, the expectations are in alignment with what can be delivered from a disaster recovery approach. And then once you have your support from leadership, make sure that you're empowered to make those decisions and you're able to make the necessary adjustments as the plan progresses. The next block there is process, and process is just as critically important, which is to drill in there would be to identify your critical business services. Typically, that can be achieved by conducting a business impact analysis. A BIA is an extensive analysis of your business from top down with people, who's involved in the recovery, what application, what data sets, and it's going to help you lay out the framework for a very high quality disaster recovery plan. And then the last block there is technology. And again, that would be identifying, but at this point, it would be identifying the key systems that are that map to those business applications. So identify all of the systems, your data integration points, what critical vendors you might have that you're relying on. Maybe you have some on-prem technologies and you have some services that are running as a SaaS-based or maybe up in Azure or AWS type things. And then another point with technology would be data mover technology. So once you get a plan in place, you're able to map the recovery requirements to the types of technologies that you might need to perform the recovery. And that's really where you start to get into the this next slide, which would be our view of it as a pyramid a top-down approach. So the priority tiers here will help you clearly see your cost requirements when you're strategizing about your disaster recovery. So once you have the business impact analysis completed, you'll use that report to create your recovery tiering and map in those DR solutions. So you'll be able to balance the business's recovery point objectives, recovery time objectives, those needs with the budget that you have in place. So this pyramid will be able to help you show where you can minimize the spend. If we just dive into this for a second, if you look at the bottom level there, you're looking at basically a tier 3 type application, which would be you're able to lose 24 or more hours of data. It's not a critical piece to your business, and you could take your time with recovery. It could take 72 hours, it could take a week. You would use a solution that would be inexpensive. Maybe you're actually writing data out to tape, and then you would recover from tape. Inexpensive storage. When you move into a tier 2 type recovery, you're looking at more of a 24 hours or less of data loss and less than 24 hours of recovery. So that's where you start to get into different technologies where Pure comes into play. Pure can help you with maybe you're still recovering from backup, but you're keeping your backups on fast disk technology like a FlashBlade architecture. And then when you get to a tier 1 level of recovery, it's almost your most critical systems and applications for your business. You can sustain only 15 minutes or less of data loss, and you need to recover those applications in less than 4 hours. That's where you get into something like a Pure Flash array active DR scenario. So you're doing storage replication, and you've got some automation on top to handle the recovery. Thanks, Andrew. So once you're in alignment with your leadership, you've identified the critical processes, and you've implemented the right technology, our technology solutions, you're ready to start testing. I'll say it again. You test, and test. That's where you're going to find the gaps in your plan. It might be things like you don't have enough subject matter experts to support the technology. Maybe you're just simply missing passwords, or you discover hidden data sets that were not being backed up. So testing is critical. It's very important to the overall strategy and plan, because DR is it continually changes. So this shows you a test plan where maybe you've tested you test every 12 months, and so you can see this risk level going up in the kind of the faded red there, and then you hit to the point where you run a DR test and you reset that risk level, and you've found the gaps, you've fixed the problems, you've changed the technology. But then another 12 months goes by before you test again, and that risk level goes up again. So how do you address that? One way would be to increase your frequency of testing. And obviously, each time you reset that risk level. But the best approach here is to layer on automation on top of these processes. When you layer on automation, you also reduce the rate of level of the risk factor that's going up. So, why is that? Well, automation is going to help you by being able to schedule those processes. They execute automatically. You can deliver reports automatically. And the reports will be efficient because they'll be able to show you truly where your recovery point objectives are and your RTOs are. And you're less reliance on someone remembering to do something at some point or documenting some process. And that also creates time and space for your IT engineers, so they can actually focus on more of the DR planning aspects of it. So Andrew, tell me what can happen when we don't have a good DR strategy, though?
Well, the reality is that sometimes this can be existential at an organizational level. From a recovery standpoint, we've actually seen that happen sometimes, unfortunately. And even, frankly, if we say we don't want to joke too much about this stuff, but the RGE acronym, resume generating event, right? So this is important stuff. And if not communicated well, sometimes the business doesn't even realize, or we're so busy doing stuff every day that there's not the time to stop and think about this. Or maybe, we tried to put one joke in here, you realize you end up becoming a sad panda. That we don't want that to be you, right? Even though I went to the severe spot first, this is a little bit lighter. Okay. So let's dive into where Pure and Recovery Point can help, right? Because obviously, we do need to focus in on that. So what about Recovery Point and Pure? First, I'll keep going with the Pure pieces, and then I'll I'll tag you back, Jeff, back in for the recovery point. But it actually makes sense because Pure, we build the technologies and recovery point creates the solutions and offerings incorporating those, right? So where I often like to start here is the idea of just hammering or focusing, emphasizing the challenge of complexity in this space. And what I was saying, so we always talk about simplicity is good, complexity is bad. Why does it matter so much here? What we're talking about are items that are potentially our last line of defense. And so if they need day-to-day care and feeding all the time to keep going, they're not going to be around when we need them. We need to do testing, but if it's every single day, we've got all this other stuff to do every day. So a couple of things from a Pure standpoint. While Pure does have a larger portfolio of things around Kubernetes focused with Portworx and FlashBlade, and we're going to focus in here on FlashArray, our unified block and file platform. Okay. And on this, one of the things I like is that we often try and start with, because we have a breadth of capabilities here, we can follow that same RPO and RTO discussion. So whether you want RPO 0 and RTO 0, or, close to 0 or asynchronous replication. Now, what's notable is all of those capabilities that I just showed, and now this is a little bit more of a centric view on the capabilities, all the product names, is that all of these are included on FlashArray without extra licensing, extra hardware required. This gives a degree of operational flexibility, frankly, both for Recovery Point as they're building options into their offerings, as well as for you even as a customer if you're running Pure Gear on-prem. You don't have to think about like, ooh, if I don't plan for this, I can't move things between tiers, or I need extra licensing or extra hardware. And these are dramatically simpler to set up and keep running than a lot of the other things that I've worked with in the past. Because I've been with Pure for 4 years, but I've worked with a bunch of the other technologies. You can find them on my LinkedIn. I won't call anything out here right now. The other piece is I would be remiss if I didn't at least say the word ransomware. And you're like, check in the bingo on ransomware. But this continues to get worse. For better or worse, I started talking about this 6 or 7 years ago. You can put Andrew Miller ransomware into Google. You'll find way too much stuff, unfortunately. And here I like to emphasize this kind of before, during, and after approach. That Pure with Recovery Point can help with an approach that's very simple to implement and operate before, immutable, plus resilient, even if there's been administrative credential compromise. That's hard to think about. And if we can't restore fast enough, it almost doesn't matter. We can offer that too. Now, you may have seen one item there that I called out, administrative credential compromise. That's really hard to think about, or even sometimes this gets into the idea of air gaps, if you will. Pure has a suite of features included around what we call safe mode. This is to help with malicious data deletion scenarios, protecting against those. It's built on our immutable snapshot technology. Even the admin can't do final deletion. So that kind of gives what we'll sometimes call a permissions air gap. Air gap can be a little bit of a fuzzy term at times, I realize, but embracing that in a positive way. And we can apply this to any data set, and we don't charge for it as well. Now, all the things that I mentioned, I know, Jeff, that you've worked on building those into various Recovery Point capabilities. Back to you.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew. So Recovery Point Systems, we are a pure play disaster recovery service provider, and we've been in business for over 30 years. So we offer many heterogeneous disaster recovery services for mainframe, IBM Power Systems, IBM I, and x86 virtual and physical. And we have partnered with Pure Storage because they're one of the best at providing recovery in the event of disasters. So, one of the things, or some of the things we call out here really are that we offer are dedicated and multi-tenant target side FlashArray target storage replication solutions. So say you're running an X70, X90 at home on the primary side, we can put an X70, X90 or so on the target recovery side. And we could step up or down. Typically it would be down based on budget and disaster recovery scenarios. So say we put like a FlashArray C60 as the target replication solution. Either way, active DR, async replication, and safe mode capabilities are there for you. So we could provide those replication solutions based on your recovery point and recovery time objective needs. One of our unique offerings on top of this is an AIX rapid recovery service, and that combines peer-to-peer storage replication, snapshotting, and then automated LPAR recovery to restore your AIX data sets quickly. And lastly, we provide Cloud Snap, which is a feature that Pure has that you're able to offload your snapshots out to object storage. So we provide object storage services where you can point your primary FlashArray and use the Cloud Snap feature to send your snapshots offsite for you. And the next slide that comes up here, Andrew, is basically just for reference, but it calls out exactly what I just discussed here. So, what that helps you with, basically what we're looking at with the cyber component to the threat landscape today is that you have to be able to plan for these scenarios. So ransomware is going to target your backups and your data and your infrastructure as well. And most organizations, they don't understand the nature and scope of a ransomware attack. And that's going to lead you into an inadequate and flawed response plan. So we were speaking with a cyber defense company this past March, and they said that February was the highest number of attacks in ransomware in the last 3 years. They even said that ransomware markets have matured to a point where they have their own help desk to help you launch your own attack. So you could just be a kid in high school and you go to the ransomware help desk and say, help me get started here. How do I launch an attack? And that's just to say that the cyber landscape is ever evolving, and you have to evolve along with that. Your DR strategies and your planning and your approach to things has to evolve as well. So you need components, you need solutions in place that are going to help you to recover. Backups are your last line of defense. And at a minimum, you need some type of on-prem and off-prem solution. So with pure flash array technologies, on-prem, you can have primary snapshotting capabilities to get you back online quickly in the event of a cyber attack. And say the cyber attack is extensive and it's really wiped you out and your whole data center is offline. Well, that's where this wheel shows you at the 5th spot here, you come to recovery point. We're going to help you bring your systems back online. At that point, you might be recovering from a backup set. But you still have that as your lifeline to bring your systems online. We can provide you with a clean room technologies where when you're recovering these systems, you can bring them up in an isolated fashion. You can run forensics analysis to sanitize the systems before you restore them back to production state. And I like to finish off here with a best practice solution for this type of cyber deterrence, which is the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. And that's really you must keep 3 copies of data. Keep one primary, maybe it's a flash array snapshot solution. Keep one backup, keep one offsite. Keep them in 2 different media sets. So keep a copy, maybe you keep a copy on disk, maybe it's on a snapshot, and then keep a copy that's immutable media, such as out on object storage, keep it on a FlashBlade solution, or write it out to tape and keep it vaulted. Keep one copy offsite, and then keep that copy air gapped. And then the final thing here, the 0, is test. As I said earlier, always test that you can recover, because technology is always changing. You have to be able to test your plan, make sure that those backup sets work, and that you are recoverable.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff, especially on the testing. I realize that's hard to do. So looking for solutions, providers that can help automate, facilitate, make the testing easier. Because just saying you should test, we all know that. But unless we automate, make it easier, it's hard to actually pull off. So we plowed through a good bit. Hopefully you learned something, maybe even a story or 2 that you may use inside your organization, or approaches in the architecture knowledge. How we can help, enabled by Recovery Point and Pure Storage's comprehensive, all-included, simplified, differentiated data protection capabilities. We did want to go ahead and make sure to take a couple questions here. We're close to time, but not quite at it. We tried to watch time, so we could do that. So I think we've got time for just a few here. The first one, I think I'll run with. So there's a question about kind of the difference between disaster recovery and ransomware recovery. And this is where I would like to think of ransomware recovery as kind of a overlap of cybersecurity and disaster recovery. Like we need to think about, for instance, the same recovery tiers. The order of recovery, the way we bring things back. A big difference, though, is in disaster recovery, we bring things back. We just push the button and we want to bring things online right away. We've done testing for that. In ransomware scenarios, we need to bring things back into an offline environment so that the incident response team, the people who are figuring out how the attacker got in, what they got access to, they feed us information. So in an offline environment, we can clean out malware, rootkits, change credentials, and then move stuff into production. There's some other differences, but that's a key one. I think, Jeff, I'll toss the next one to you. It's around, I'm going to paraphrase, but how can you balance recovery requirements with budget constraints?
Thanks, Andrew. That's a good question. And that goes back to the pyramid that I was showing you. So you need to run some type of analysis. It might be a deep dive business impact analysis. Or it could be a lighter approach, something like we call it a systems impact analysis. Either way, you need to know what you have plugged in on the wire and what's critical to your business. And then based on that information, you're able to map in the technology and the solutions to meet those business needs. With Recovery Point and Pure, we can scale up or down, and we can blend solutions to make sure that you have the right technology, the right solution, and the right budget.
Last one, I'll combine a couple. It's kind of around cost and recovery. So how much do various Pure capabilities you mentioned cost? They're included right there. They're not free. They're included right there part of the solution, whether it's the Pure products, the Recovery Point solution. And then for a ransomware recovery, do I need to restore back to when the attackers got into my environment, maybe months ago? And that's a common one I get, because we can't go back months back to restore our data. Like, we'll all go out of business. So it's restoring to right before the point of encryption and recovering in an offline environment. I think with that, we are out of time. We covered a lot. Jeff, thank you so much for jumping in the boat with me here today. If you all have any questions, you can see our contact information there. Over to you, Jeff, for the final word.
Thank you, Andrew. It's just been a pleasure.
Great. Thanks all. Actual Tech folks, back to you.